Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are diving deep today into a story of, just raw political ambition, prophetic trauma, and the kind of meticulous, decades-long geopolitical engineering that really makes you question who is actually holding the reins of power in the galaxy.
We're looking at an incredibly volatile and crucial period for the Romulan Star Empire.
Absolutely.
It's a state that was, completely fractured, decimated, and really teetering on the edge of collapse. We're focusing on how this political vacuum, which was left by years of catastrophic war, brutal internal assassinations, and just this crippling civil division, how it was ultimately filled.
Right.
And the really surprising thing here is that it wasn't filled by Romulans seeking traditional power. It was filled by outside forces using layers of really intricate plotting, calculated external manipulation, and, well, strategic violence to achieve a very specific, quiet kind of stability.
And our sources for this deep dive, they track these simultaneous high-stakes campaigns. You have reunification, the struggle for power, and just simple survival. And it's happening across multiple governments all at once. So the mission here is to detail how a series of perfectly calculated moves led to the rapid emergence of a new and what looks like a legitimate and stable Romulan government, but one that was engineered entirely by an external galactic alliance to serve their own dangerous long-term goals.
Yeah, and you really have to see it as four major interlocking pieces on the board that we need to analyze.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the intense, just zero-sum political conflict within the Romulan government. That's between the autocratic praetor, Talora, and her rival, Empress Tanatra.
The two warring factions.
Exactly. Second, you have the suddenly controversial but absolutely vital presence of Ambassador Spock and his illegal Vulcan-Romulan reunification movement.
Which has been a background element for years, and now it's front and center.
It's the catalyst. Third, and this is so important, you have the geopolitical backdrop. The Federation is just struggling after the Borg invasion. Their staggering losses are what create the political space for this crisis to even happen.
Right.
And then finally, you've got the central and often invisible role played by the new Typhon Pact, specifically the chillingly rational and incredibly patient Tenki coalition.
So this isn't just a political struggle.
No, not at all. It's high-stakes chess, where the price of losing is either your life or, the continued existence of your entire empire.
That sets a perfect stage. Let's jump right into the fire and start with Spock, because he's operating where the danger is most acute.
We begin with Spock's immediate precarious situation on Romulus. His movement to unify the Vulcan and Romulan peoples had been illegal for a long, long time. It was treated as sedition by the Praetor's security forces.
So he's a wanted man, essentially.
A very wanted man. And to survive, Spock's cell, which was known as the Ki-Baratam cell, was forced to operate in absolute dedicated secrecy. They worked deep beneath the surface of Romulus, in the old maintenance tunnels and these forgotten sublevels of the capital.
And the level of paranoia was systemic, wasn't it? I remember the sources really emphasizing that the cell had already stopped carrying communicators altogether.
Yeah.
Why was that detail so crucial?
It was a necessary defensive measure, one they learned through really bitter experience. Praetor Talora's security forces had already tracked down and captured several of their comrades just by monitoring their personal devices.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this forced the Ki-Baratam cell, and this included trusted long-term allies like D-Tan and Korthan, to communicate only through coded face-to-face meetings or highly secured landlines.
So the fact that Spock himself, a huge target, is walking around without even a basic emergency comm, that tells you everything you need to know about the operational environment they were in.
It does. The slightest misstep meant capture, interrogation, or, much worse.
And this situation, already so tense, just suddenly becomes violent. Walk us through the assassination attempt that happened beneath the Ki-Baratam district.
Spock was attacked by an unseen assailant. He was using a blade, and it left Spock seriously wounded in the midsection. The sources really emphasized the acute agony of it, a blinding pain that just clouded his vision.
And that detail is important.
It's very important because in that moment of physical shock and intense suffering, Spock instinctually used a powerful, almost desperate empathic projection.
He reached out with his mind.
He did. And this allowed him to connect with his attacker's mind, a connection which confirmed the assailant was not a Romulan security agent, but a silent, highly trained man.
And that is the pivotal moment, I have to ask, because for anyone listening who knows the political geography here, this seems totally counterintuitive.
It does, on the surface.
Right. Why would a Reman, whose people are fighting a brutal war for independence against their Romulan enslavers, and who have found protection under the Klingon Empire on Korgat the Five, why would they risk everything to assassinate the one figure who preaches peace and reunification? Their enemy is the Praetor, not the Vulcan ambassador.
And that is a core political insight Spock's team immediately had to wrestle with. What's so fascinating here is that the attack wasn't about vengeance against the Romulans at all. It was a cold, strategic political hit, and it was designed to preserve Reman independence.
Let's unpack that strategic realization because that's a huge leap to make.
Well, Spock's comrades, D-Tan and Korthan, they synthesized the implications almost immediately. They realized that a successful Vulcan-Romulan reunification would mean the reintegration of the entire Star Empire.
Meaning Talora's government and Danatra's splinter state would merge.
Exactly. And a unified Romulan state, even one tied to Vulcan logic, would be inherently stronger. It would stabilize the government, it would free up internal resources, and it would potentially reinvigorate the Romulan military.
And this newly strengthened, unified state,
it would pose a far greater and existential threat to a Reman independence on Korgat IV than the current situation of two fragmented, bleeding, and frankly distracted Romulan powers. The Reman's mission was to destabilize the reunification effort before it could solidify Romulan power.
So Spock is bleeding out, and he's staring at the embodiment of this desperate strategic logic. And he sees an opportunity, not to hide the assassin, but to use him. He turns his own near-death experience into political capital. I mean, that is an incredibly cold-blooded calculation for someone who's dedicated to peace.
It speaks volumes about the level of political maneuvering required for his work. He couldn't keep the Reman captive without compromising his entire cell, and just killing him would give him no strategic gain whatsoever.
So he executes the gambit.
He does. The highly strategic, very high-risk decision to turn the captured silent Reman assassin over directly to Romulan security.
And was there any dissent within the Kibara-10 cell? Did D-Tan or Korthan argue against this? I mean, handing over a victim of Romulan oppression to the people who are essentially their torturers, all in the name of reunification.
There was significant emotional and ethical wrestling, yes, absolutely. But Spock argued, and they ultimately agreed, that this leverage was the only viable path forward. His explicit aim was to force an immediate high-level meeting with Praetor Talora.
How would that work?
The argument was simple and compelling. The attempted assassination on an influential public figure by an external hostile entity, a Reman, provided the perfect, indisputable justification for Talora to immediately decriminalize the Vulcan-Romulan reunification movement.
It completely shifts the narrative.
Exactly. Spock reasoned that this move would instantly shift the public focus away from the illegality of his movement and onto the larger unifying goal of strengthening the Romulan empires against external threats.
Which, of course, conveniently serves Talora's own political aims against Danatra.
Precisely. Danatra had positioned herself as the protector of the old Romulan ways, and now she would appear weak in the face of this external aggression.
Which brings us to the pivotal scene at the Via Callias security office. Spock, wounded and hooded, presenting the assassin. Tell us about that confrontation.
So Spock walks into a Praetor security outpost, the heart of the internal surveillance system, with his prisoner. He steps inside, shrouded, and just announces, "I am Spock."
And the reaction?
Immediate recognition by officers like Soren and Javelk. Instantaneous, followed by alarm. The doors, inner and outer, immediately seal, trapping everyone inside. The security protocol for handling a known, high-value illegal operative like Spock was clearly drilled into them.
So what happens when the prisoner is revealed?
Spock announces his purpose. He's remanding the malefactor for attempted assassination. Officer Soren, who's trying to follow protocol despite the shock of Spock's presence, orders the prisoner to remove his hood.
And that's when all hell breaks loose.
That's it. The Reman, recognizing that he is now trapped and facing a fate far worse than death, just lets out this guttural roar. He fights violently, flinging officers, including Javelk and the highest-ranking officer there, Protector Rudel, away from him in a desperate attempt to either escape or be killed quickly.
So what does Arjul do in the middle of all this chaos?
Well, in the ensuing mayhem, before security teams can effectively stun or subdue the Reman, Protector Arjul acts quickly to contain the situation. And maybe he's realizing the immense political value of Spock here.
He grabs him.
He seizes the Vulcan ambassador and detains him. So Spock's gambit works. He successfully engineered his own detention by the Praetor's forces, guaranteeing that meeting with Talora.
But that violence, the chaos, and the specific detention by Orgel, that becomes crucial later on.
Absolutely. Those details provide the raw material for some highly effective manufactured evidence down the line.
Right, and this internal Romulan chaos, fueled by assassination plots and power grabs, it didn't happen in a vacuum, did it?
No, not at all. It was enabled directly by the catastrophic state of its primary adversary and its traditional counterweight, the United Federation of Planets.
Let's pivot to the Federation then. We talk about the post-Borg invasion era, but I think we really need to grasp the sheer brutal scale of the loss that left the Federation so geopolitically weak.
The sources are, well, they're chillingly specific. The Borg invasion cost the Federation 63 billion lives.
63 billion. That number is just, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
It is. It destabilized entire economies, cultural centers, essential services, all across dozens of member worlds. And on top of that, Starfleet itself was gutted. They lost more than 40% of their total operational fleet capacity.
So this weakness wasn't just theoretical. It was an open, bleeding wound.
And it was a wound that aggressive powers like the Tzenkethi and the Romulans noticed immediately. The Federation was just too busy rebuilding and, frankly, burying its dead to effectively police the internal affairs of its neighbors.
And the human cost of this defense is perfectly reflected in Captain Sisko's own experience commanding the USS New York. Tell us about the defense of Alonis.
The New York was part of a very limited task force defending Alonis, which is a highly strategic aquatic Federation world. The intelligence they had showed the Borg approaching in this devastating formation of 6 massive cubes.
And Sisko, in command of the defense force, knew they couldn't just destroy all 6 in time.
Not a chance, so he made the ultimate sacrifice play.
He used his ship as a shield.
Precisely. Sisko ordered the New York to interpose itself directly between one of the advancing Borg cubes and the Indigo planet below. They were using a massive starship, crewed by thousands, as a literal shield to protect billions of lives beneath those violet waters. It was desperate. It was necessary.
What was the combat like? And what was the mechanical consequence of that decision?
It was almost instant defeat. I mean, they were under fire, enduring repeated Borg attacks, until the USS James T. Kirk, commanded by Captain Elias Vaughn, managed this stunning, high-risk tactical maneuver.
The transphasic harmonics.
Right, a rare, very potent technology. And he used it to successfully destroy one of the cubes. That was their only victory.
But that victory came at a terrible cost to Sisko's ship.
Oh, absolutely. The immediate consequential damage wasn't even from the cube's direct weapons fire. It was from the massive debris field generated by the cube's explosion.
The shrapnel, essentially.
A shower of it, and it just slammed into the New York.
Yeah.
The result was brutal. 4 contained hull breaches, which is a testament to the engineering team's quick response, keeping that damage compartmentalized.
Great.
But it was catastrophic damage nonetheless. The starboard nacelle was critically compromised.
So no engines.
Warp and impulse engines, both out. The New York was dead in space. A motionless, powerless witness to the continuing devastation.
And this tragedy, it's intensely personal for Sisko.
It is a layered tragedy. Not only did he lose his command capability, but Captain Elias Vaughn, the commander of the Kirk and a trusted longtime friend, was critically wounded in that engagement.
What happened to him?
Vaughn suffered a traumatic head injury, resulting in 0 measurable brain activity. And this was a man who had dedicated decades to Starfleet intelligence, only recently finding genuine self-fulfillment leading a starship crew. His loss was a profound, immediate tragedy for Sisko and the entire command structure.
This loss, and it's coupled with his pre-existing trauma, the death of his father, and this perceived spiritual mandate he receives.
Yes, from the Bajoran prophets.
They tell him he must walk the path alone to protect his family, specifically Cassidy and his daughter, Rebecca. How did Sisko interpret and then act on that mandate?
Sisko interpreted this message with, well, a devastating literalism. He saw it as a mandate for absolute personal isolation. He viewed his emotional distance as a necessary protective barrier.
So he rejects going home to Bajor.
Completely. He understood that if he went back, he'd be unable to leave again, and that would expose them to whatever unknown future threat the prophets were warning him about. Instead, he chose to bury himself in active duty. He returned to Starfleet.
But the crucial insight here is his method of self-exile. He didn't just leave, he actually engineered the difficulty of their separation.
That's right. He deliberately created distance and discomfort with his wife, Cassidy. He believed that if he pushed her away now, his departure would be easier for her in the long run. He viewed his personal isolation, this crushing, self-imposed loneliness, as a necessary, painful sacrifice for his family's ultimate safety.
He accepts being the bad guy.
Yes. the distant husband, the remote captain, if it meant his family survived. It's a profound, tragic acceptance of fatalism.
And this necessary isolation created immediate, measurable problems within his command structure. On the USS Robinson, where he'd taken a new captaincy, Commander Ruggiero confronts him. What was the specific nature of that challenge?
Ruggiero pointed out that Sisko's remoteness wasn't just a matter of social discomfort, it was negatively impacting ship efficiency and morale.
Oh, so.
Ruggiero noted that the captain had, and this is a quote, nothing to do with the crew beyond issuing them orders. The lack of personal rapport, the absence of the typical Starfleet command closeness, was creating friction and slowing down operational responses. It suggested that a ship's effectiveness is not just tactical, but it's also relational.
Does the source suggest Sisko ever reevaluated that prophetic mandate? Or was his interpretation of walk the path alone just a fixed, fatalistic acceptance of his own trauma?
It seems to be the latter. He acknowledges the truth of Ruggiero's observations internally. He knows his choice is hurting his crew and his family, but he believes he must make that choice.
And he can't explain why.
Not to a skeptical Commander Ruggiero, no. His reasons are esoteric and deeply personal. He just tells the commander he will take the recommendation under advisement, knowing full well that he cannot and he will not fundamentally change the path he believes he's required to walk.
So the Federation's institutional weakness is mirrored in Sisko's personal isolation.
Perfectly. Both are too focused on defense and self-preservation to engage effectively with the surrounding political chaos.
And this context of Federation exhaustion is so vital because it explains why the Romulan Star Empire, despite its own internal devastation, felt empowered to act so aggressively.
They saw a geopolitical vacuum, and Praetor Talora was absolutely determined to fill it.
Talora is a fascinating figure. She seizes power after surviving Shinzon's disastrous coup, which decimated the previous Senate. Her rule is characterized as autocratic, but she's also credited with an undeniable, if brutal, stabilizing force.
She held the government together during the worst of the fallout. Her autocratic measures were severe, they involved swift repression and centralized power, and that drew the ire of the old guard, particularly the powerful familial institutions. But stability, however brutal, was precisely what the Empire desperately needed after the chaos of the Raymond coup and the subsequent division with Donatra.
So to understand the true mechanics of power on Romulus, we have to look beyond the Praetor's office and examine the influence of the 100. Who exactly are they, and how did they exert control?
The 100 refers to the 50 families, the 80 most powerful familial dynasties who controlled the vast majority of Romulan wealth, industrial resources, military procurement, planetary assets, everything.
So while the Senate is the official legislative body,
the 100 hold the purse strings, they control the infrastructure. No praetor could truly govern without their tacit approval. They are the entrenched financial and aristocratic power structure.
and Talara, in a move to consolidate her power, she calls for the reconstitution of the Senate, which had been practically wiped out by Shinzon. What was the real political genius behind that move?
It served three key purposes. First, it provided a veneer of legitimacy to her rule after the power vacuum. Second, and this is crucial, it was designed to deflect responsibility.
How so?
The senators, once they were seated, would share the political blame for the empire's immense hardships. Things like rampant nutritional deprivation in the lower cities and the crippling decade-long political division with Empress Donatra's imperial state. She was basically sharing the failure while retaining ultimate control.
And this call forced the hand of the families. Let's focus on the Ordicant clan, one of the wealthiest and most influential of the 100. They faced a critical decision: participate in Talora's game or risk isolation.
Right, and their internal debate was led by Elder Gel Camamore, an incredibly experienced figure. Camamore wasn't just a politician. Her resume was a roadmap of Romulan institutional power.
What was her background?
She was a distinguished professor of ancient history, served as an ambassador, worked as a military liaison during wartime, was a successful city administrator, and even a territorial governor. She understood the workings of the empire from the theoretical to the intensely practical.
So what was Camamore's intensely pragmatic argument to her clan about accepting the Senate seats?
She cut straight through the political niceties. She argued that regardless of how they felt about Talora's autocratic nature, the clan must accept the Senate seats now to secure future power and advance the inevitable cause of reunification.
A long-game perspective.
Exactly. Camamore predicted that if they abdicated this authority, if they allowed other clans to seize those limited Senate positions, they would, quote, likely have to fight for it later. meaning they'd be forced into a costly, chaotic civil war or a bloody internal conflict to regain influence once the Empire was whole. Her perspective was that Romulan unity was coming, either through peace or war, and the Oricant needed to be positioned at the apex.
Meanwhile, you have Proconsul Tomalak, a long-serving, cautious former Imperial fleet officer serving as the public voice for Talora in front of the Hundred.
Yes, Tomalak, who was often criticized for his previous belligerent tendencies toward the Federation, was the face of assurance. He told the assembled families that the Praetor wanted one empire made whole and was willing to share her autocratic burden through this newly reconstituted Senate.
But he has his own ambitions.
Of course, Tomalak was positioning himself as the loyal deputy, ready to step into greater power should Talora stumble.
But the real power threat, the true invisible hand here, lay with the intelligence community, the Tal Shiar.
Absolutely. Chairman Rihik of the Tal Shiar was the master plotter. He favored order and stability above all else, seeing Shinzon's chaos as fundamentally destructive. Rihik was not loyal to any individual praetor, only to the stability of the Romulan state, as defined by himself.
And he had a history, this sort of thing.
A long history. He had orchestrated events, including eliminating rivals and maneuvering Praetor Hiron into power, and later overthrowing the ailing former Tal Shiar chairman to seize control of the intelligence agency himself.
He sounds like a systemic threat to everyone in that room.
He was. Rihik controlled the intelligence assets and the necessary political blackmail to imperil everyone present, including Talora. That's why their relationship was based on mutual distrust.
So Talora knew Rihik could betray her at any moment.
And Rihik knew Talora was unstable and overly ambitious. Their alliance was strictly temporary, a necessary evil, until one of them could eliminate the other.
And this unstable internal dynamic is exactly what the external players were observing and ultimately exploiting.
Exactly.
This brings us to the true geopolitical game changer, the rise of the Typhon Pact. This is the new alliance Romulus, the Tholians, the Kinshaya, and the Tenkathi. Romulus may believe they are more equal, as Tomalak suggested, because of their resources, but our sources show the pact is just defined by internal friction.
It is an alliance of convenience born of fear of the Federation and the Klingons. We see immediate tensions, like the conflict between the Tholian Korskan and the Tsenkathi Alazom, who have entirely different philosophical approaches to galactic relations. But it is the Tsenkathi who are doing the heavy lifting in terms of political architecture. They are the patient, cold engineers of the desired stability.
So we really need to understand that Tsenkathi worldview led by Ottar Korsantan Reg Tulavai, because that dictates their entire strategy.
Their philosophy is one of chilling, arrogant rationalism. They view the Federation as fatally, fundamentally flawed.
How so?
They see a republic founded on an unregulated gene pool, where inferior minds and chaotic democracy are allowed to select leaders. In their view, this inevitably leads to inferior results, systemic inefficiency, and eventual downfall. They believe any society that allows mediocre and substandard minds to choose their path is destined for collapse.
Wow. So they see themselves as the rational, logical inheritors of the galaxy.
That's it. So their strategic goal regarding Romulus is purely transactional.
What do they need from them?
They need a unified Romulan Star Empire to serve as a strong, competent counterweight to the weakened but still dangerous Federation and Klingons. They need a shield, a strategic ally. But here is the critical nuance, the hidden requirement.
They needed a controllable leader.
Exactly. They couldn't afford for a unified RSE to dominate the Pact itself, or launch a destabilizing premature war that would draw the Federation into a conflict before the Pact was ready. Talora, with her military ambition and personal vengeance, was deemed far too volatile for their long-term plan.
Enter Alazom Torfele, the architect of the new Romulan regime. Who was she, and what was her specific mission?
Alazom was a Level A problem solver, a top-tier special agent operating directly under the Autarch. She was undercover on Romulus, posing as Trade Representative Nimgara, a persona that gave her immediate deep access to the Hundred. Her mission was to identify, vet, and install the most suitable candidate for Praetor.
And after all her research...
After extensive contact with influential Romulans, observing the dynamics of the Hundred in the Senate reconstitution, she settled on a single choice: Gel Camamore.
Why Camamore? She had the pedigree, sure, but what made her the perfect Tsenkathi asset compared to the fiery ambition of Talora?
Camamore's strength was her stability. Her profound understanding of institutional operation, her capacity for pragmatic compromise. She was loyal to the state, but not to individuals,
Whereas Talora was driven by personal survival and vengeance.
which meant unpredictable military expansion. Camor was driven by the necessity of long-term stability and economic health. The Sinkithi calculated that Camomor, with her background as an ambassador and liaison, would prioritize maintaining the Typhon Pact alliance over any rash military action. She was strong enough to rule, but rational enough to be controlled.
And this is where the political dark arts become explicit and surgical. To ensure Camomor's rapid ascension, Alazome had to create a political vacancy in the Senate.
This is the definitive proof of external engineering. The sources confirm Alazome's tactical success. She, quote, dispatched the senator that had been representing her group, Senator Zarian Dor, to create the necessary vacancy in the Ordocan clan's representation.
So she had him killed.
Dor's death was not random. It was a calculated assassination designed to open the door for Camomor at exactly the right moment. The murder's clean, precise, and targeted specifically to elevate the Sinkithi's ideal candidate.
So Alazome orchestrates the murder, then immediately uses her influence to lobby the Ordocan clan to select Camomor as the replacement senator.
Yes, her calculus was flawless. By ensuring Camomor got the Senate seat now, she positioned her perfectly. Alazome knew that after Talora's inevitable demise, which was clearly built into the Sinkithi timeline, Camomor would be voted into the praetorship quickly and naturally by the continuing committee.
So it would appear to be a legitimate internal choice.
Exactly. And this strategy achieved their ultimate goal: a unified, stable, and predictably non-dominant Romulan Star Empire, fulfilling the strategic needs of Typhon Pact without sparking a premature galactic war.
The stage is set for the final moves then. Spock, leveraging that reman incident, successfully argues his case to Praetor Talora from detention. What was the exact reasoning that swayed the autocratic plea?
Spock's argument was that legalizing the reunification movement would instantly redirect Romulan public opinion. Instead of focusing on Talora's unpopular autocratic rule, the rampant nutritional deprivation, and the economic strain of the division.
The public would focus on uniting the two Romulan states against a shared threat.
A shared threat, the Rimans, and by extension, the Klingons. Talora, seeing the chance to mobilize popular fervor and use it as a weapon against her rival Denatra, agreed. She believed she was manipulating Spock.
And Spock understood he was being manipulated but saw it as a necessary step.
Right. It advanced the cultural mission.
And the immediate result confirms this was statecraft, not spontaneous support.
Oh, it's absolutely unsettlingly so. Widespread, highly organized unity protests immediately erupted across the Romulan Star Empire. And crucially, they were instantly mirrored in Denatra's imperial state, hitting key worlds like Xanatla and Achernar Prime simultaneously.
They were too coordinated to be real.
Exactly. Spock and his allies, seeing the uniformity of the structure, the shared slogans, the total lack of genuine security resistance, immediately concluded these were not organic. They were staged, meticulously planned, and executed by a powerful entity, almost certainly Talora's government, to create irresistible public calls for unification.
This is political fiction being broadcast as the authentic will of the people, and it forces the Federation's hand. Sisko, still captain of the Robinson, is sent as an envoy. Why Sisko, and what was his mission on Achernar Prime?
Sisko was sent because he was a known quantity, a respected combat veteran, and he was instructed to meet Empress Denatra to gauge the situation, specifically concerning the lingering, politically radioactive questions about the Spock assassination attempt. The Federation needed to know if Denatra was destabilizing the region by sponsoring terrorism.
Denatra, faced with these overwhelming staged protests, seems to have been pushed into a corner.
She was visibly distraught and very suspicious. She immediately accused Talora of orchestrating the demonstrations to discredit her authority and undermine her public support.
And when Sisko pressed her on the Spock situation,
she issued an explicit, categorical denial of any role in either the attempt on Spock's life or the subsequent mysterious murder of the Reman inside Romulan security.
And she didn't just deny it. She warned Sisko that Talora was actively manufacturing evidence to frame her.
That is the most critical piece of intelligence Sisko received. Denatra specifically warned him that Talora was falsifying official records, specifically citing those related to Protector Arjul, the officer who detained Spock.
The same Arjul from the security office?
The very same. Denatra revealed that Arjul had served aboard her own ship, the Valdor, early in his career. Talora was using this tenuous, decades-old connection to manufacture a direct link between Danatra's command history and the officer who handled the assassin and Spock's detention.
The perfect frame-up.
It was. This false evidence would frame her for commissioning the crimes, thereby collapsing her credibility with the Federation and the Klingons, who might otherwise have supported her.
It's the perfect engineered political trap. So, faced with diminishing military resources and this growing manufactured public clamor for unity, Dinatra makes a desperate public countermove.
She seized the moral high ground. Dinatra issued a highly publicized televised invitation to Praetor Talora for the Peace Summit on Achenar Prime. Her goal was twofold. First, to halt Talora's accelerating political or military actions, and second, to force Talora to either accept peace and therefore risk having to share power.
Or refuse and look like the sole belligerent blocking Romulan unity.
Precisely.
Talora accepts Dinatra's public invitation, but as you mentioned, this is pure treachery. What was the internal plan for this summit?
Talora, working with Tomalak and the still-living chairman Rihik of the Tal Shiar, planned to arrest Dinatra immediately upon her arrival on Romulus. They intended to use the manufactured evidence, that false link between Dinatra and Protector Argel, to indict her on criminal charges of sedition, attempted assassination, and murder.
So Talora believed she had her cornered perfectly.
She did. But just as Talora cornered Dinatra, the Tal Shiar chairman Rihik was simultaneously preparing his own internal coup against the Praetor.
Of course he was. That's the brutal reality of Romulan power politics, isn't it? Everyone is plotting against everyone else.
Constantly. Rihik's plan was to wait for Dinatra's arrest and execution, allowing Talora to take all the initial credit for unification. Then he planned to expose Talora for framing Dinatra, using the resulting political upheaval to have Talora removed and install his own puppet candidate, Senator Dujik, as the new Praetor.
Maximum control. A stable government led by someone indebted solely to the Tal Shiar.
That was the goal.
It's a three-dimensional game of treachery, but Talora's own agent, Sela, strikes first, demonstrating that Talora had a few surprises of her own.
Scylla, the consummate master of intrigue and loyal only to Talora's survival, neutralizes the greatest internal threat. Before Rihik can execute his plan, Scylla orchestrates the fiery airpod crash that kills Chairman Rihik and his adjutant Torath on the outskirts of Kibaratan.
Not far from where Spock began his gambit.
Not far at all. The sheer speed and precision of this strike neutralized the massive Tal Shiar threat just hours before the Dinatra summit was to begin.
Describe the scene of Rihik's death as detailed in the sources.
The crash site was a twisted mess of metallic debris. The sources mention the acrid scent of ozone and charred copper. Rihik, the man who sought stability his entire life by eliminating chaos, was found face down in the mud, his neck bent at a profoundly unnatural angle.
He died in the chaos he hated most.
Just moments before his own carefully planned coup was set to begin, Scylla had cleared the chessboard for her benefactor.
So with Rihik eliminated, the path is clear for Talora's victory.
It is. Dinatra arrives on Romulus for the peace summit, expecting dialogue, but instead is immediately arrested by forces led by Arjul and indicted on the manufactured criminal charges. She's imprisoned at the D'Deridex Arc Security Office.
Then Talora seizes the moment.
She declares the Imperial Romulan state no more, achieving the unified Romulan Star Empire and securing the public endorsement and immediate support of the Typhon Pact. She looks untouchable.
But the bloodshed isn't finished. Talora unified the Empire, fulfilling the Syncothi's immediate need, and then she herself vanishes from the stage.
Within just 30 days of unifying the Empire, and that time frame speaks volumes about the Syncothi's lack of patience. Talora is found dead in her praetor's chair by Proconsul Tomalak. She was slumped over, eyes closed, seemingly at rest, though still warm to the touch.
And the official explanation is a political term disguised as a medical condition.
Yes, the official cause of death is stated as Veldrix Rinva, which translates roughly to the usurper, a rare, incredibly convenient disease resulting in brain aneurysms.
A highly sophisticated political assassination.
Almost certainly. Given the context of the Syncothi's need for a stable, predictable leader, and their assessment that Talora was too volatile for the long haul, she had fulfilled her purpose unification and was immediately removed by the ultimate beneficiaries of that unity.
And the final piece of the tragedy is the fate of Empress Dinatra. Spock visits her, only to find her dead.
Yes. Spock, who had struggled to gain access to her D'Deridex arc cell, finds her dead by suicide, apparently using a toxic patch applied via her arm. He's filled with this profound sadness, reflecting on the fate of this dedicated, if flawed, leader.
He knew she was innocent.
He notes the absolute impossibility of the crime she was charged with, her alleged murder of the Reman assassin, knowing she was the victim of a masterful frame-up. He mourns her defeat, a leader who professed justice, but died framed, defeated, and consumed by the political fiction built around her.
So the Sankethi operation is complete. The rivals have eliminated each other or been eliminated at crucial moments. Rihik is dead, Tel Ora is dead, and Dinatra is dead.
Exactly. With the field cleared and the Empire unified, Gil Camelmore, the candidate specifically chosen and maneuvered by Alazom Torfeli, is elected the new praetor.
The Tsenki strategic goal is perfectly achieved.
The Romulan Empire is unified, strong, and led by a strong but politically non-aggressive, pragmatic leader who understands the absolute necessity of the Typhon Pact alliance.
With the dust settled and the new government installed, let's look at where this leaves our key figures. Starting with Spock and his reunification mission. Camor is in power. How does she approach the now legal reunification movement?
Her approach is highly pragmatic, which reflects her Tsinkethi-approved stability mandate. Praetor Camor confirms that she will not recriminalize the reunification movement or suppress public speech. She views it as unnecessary because the movement, while popular, no longer poses a political threat.
Well, she certainly doesn't embrace it.
No, not at all. She views Spock's goal as unnecessary and unlikely to succeed, particularly given Romulus's newly defined priorities. Her focus is laser-sharp: alliance cohesion within the Typhon Pact, and internal stability. She is unwilling to spend political capital fighting a popular, harmless cultural movement.
And Spock, the ultimate political chess player, he recognizes this.
He does. He recognizes that the grounds for his public movement are gone. His goal, while now legal, is fundamentally opposed to the new government's geopolitical commitment.
So what does he advise his comrades?
He advises them to significantly reduce their profile and wait for future opportunities. They understand that while Camamor is preferable to the violently autocratic Tel Ora, their mission to unite Vulcan and Romulan culture remains incredibly challenging. They've won the public battle for legitimacy.
But they've lost the geopolitical war for the soul of the Romulan Star Empire to the Sankethi.
Precisely.
And finally, Captain Sisko. He remains trapped in the lonely existence he mandated for himself, a profound personal sacrifice for the sake of his family.
Sisko's trajectory is fixed. Having rejected the option of returning home to Bajor, driven by the Prophet's chilling instruction to walk the path alone, Sisko accepts his fate. He decides to remain active in Starfleet, seeing his lonely existence as a necessary duty and a sacrificial shield for Cassidy and Rebecca.
Was there any moment of doubt about his interpretation of that mandate?
If there was, he crushed it entirely. He internalized that he cannot trust himself to return home because if he broke the separation, if he allowed himself that happiness and closeness, he would be unable to leave them again, which would then expose them to the unknown future threat.
He views his isolation as the only way to guarantee their safety.
It's the only way. The sources confirm the finality of his decision. He has sent a final message to Cassidy, completing his self-imposed separation. He believes that by maintaining this distance, she will eventually accept his absence and be safe. He is forever bound to Starfleet duty, walking his lonely, self-imposed path.
So if we look back at this whole Romulan crisis, what we've witnessed is not a traditional conflict.
No, not at all. We have seen how the complex web of internal political conflict, the brutal rivalry between Tel Ora and Dinatra, the constant threat of the Tal Shor's internal coup, all of that combined with legitimate geopolitical fear, specifically the post-Borg weakness of the Federation, was systematically and brilliantly exploited by an external power, the Tsenkethi coalition.
They didn't win by fighting a war. They won by engineering the internal political stability they needed. They paved the way for a unified empire by surgically eliminating key players at opportune moments, resulting in a regime led by their ideal candidate, Gel Camamor.
Power, in this case, was never about having the largest fleet or the strongest military. It was about controlling who holds the reins and ensuring that internal conflict doesn't destabilize your larger strategic goals. The Tsenkethi succeeded because they understood the enemy of their enemy's enemy.
It's a masterful lesson in manufactured consent and controlled chaos. We saw widespread unity protests staged with such meticulous precision that they were instantly mistaken for a genuine popular uprising, completely destabilizing Dinatra's state.
And we saw evidence meticulously fabricated, that connection between Protector Arjul and Dinatra's ship, the Valdor, to frame a powerful rival and lead directly to her death. This wasn't consensus forming. It was consensus being surgically manufactured at the highest political level.
And this raises an extremely important question for all of us. Living in an age of information saturation where political consensus can be meticulously engineered and spread across every channel, from subspace transmissions to public protests. When the protests look real, when the data is compelling, and when the evidence is presented by a seemingly legitimate government official, how do you discern the true, organic will of the people from a carefully calculated, strategically disseminated political fiction designed to advance an unseen external agenda?
That's the question.
That ability to discern truth from engineered consensus might be the single most crucial survival skill for navigating any empire today.